before I say anything, my chair is super noisy and wiggly, so if you hear something, it's the chair. I plan on getting a new one soon, well, eventually, but... So anyways, I posted a video about 1.5 years ago of me making my first Silent Hill nurse mask, and it got pretty popular over the last year, especially around Halloween. And since then I've posted another video of me making a newer mask, which is of this one right here, and it got a lot of attraction, and I'm super happy about that, so thank you, first of all. These are the two that I've had sitting around with me for a while, and then I have this new one right here that I just made. This one's gonna be a little different than these ones, just because I made the neck portion a little longer and I changed what I did on the back just a little bit. But I'm gonna go into more depth than I was able to on my TikTok videos, and hopefully I'll be able to help people. Alright, so first things first, here's all the materials that I use, and I'll just list them on the side. So I use 4-way stretch fabric for the back, these paper mache masks, acrylic paint, fabric paint, either hot glue or super glue works. Masking tape and newspaper is used to bulk out this styrofoam head more, just to make it bigger. A container to mix your Elmer's glue and water in, glossy Mod Podge, these bandage rolls or like gauze bandages, and also fabric stretchy bandages, plastic wrap to cover the foam head, and I think that is everything. Yes, it is. Okay, so this first step is super optional whether you want to make your own cloth head covering or just buy a balaclava. So what I'm doing now is I'm using newspaper and masking tape to bulk out my foam head, just so that it's the same size as my head, that way the mask will fit comfortably. Once I have my foam head to the size that I want, I then use plastic wrap to cover the entire thing. I'm then going to cover all of the plastic wrap with a layer of masking tape. This is how I make the pattern for my head covering. Alright, so with my foam head all covered in tape, other than this spot apparently, but that's okay. I'm going to just make a pattern for my fabric. I'll kind of show you how I do it once I have it drawn on, because it's a little confusing. Okay, here's my pattern all drawn out. It might be a little confusing, especially right here, because I drew extra lines that I'm not using. So basically what I did is I split it into 3 sections. So I've got the front right of the face, the front left of the face, and then this big section is the back. Also make sure, well, you don't have to do this, but I am going to be covering the neck as well, so I'm just, you know, I extended it down to the neck, so that will be covered as well. And then these are just marked to know where, like which side I'm going to be connecting them to, and then I also mark the top part of the pattern and the bottom. So now my next step is I'm going to cut out all of my pieces individually, and then after that I will just sew them all together. Alright, so I've got my patterns all cut out individually. I'm gonna actually split this pattern into 2 just because you're not gonna be able to make a pattern out of that. So once I split it, it'll be flatter and I'll be able to trace it onto my fabric. Okay, so I split that part into 2, so now I have 4 sections. If you were doing this, split it into 4 sections, or buy a balaclava because it is so much easier and it saves so much time and material. But I enjoy making things difficult for myself, so I'm just making my own. Alright, hi, we're on the floor now. I'm just going to trace all of these out onto fabric, and then I'm going to sew them. And make sure, if you're doing this and you trace it, make sure to leave seam allowance around it so that when you sew it, it has, you know, a little more room. I'm not doing any sort of fancy sewing here. I'm basically just pinning all of my pieces together and then sewing them with a basic stitch. I have like no experience in sewing, so literally just basic sewing knowledge is happening here. So here's my head covering all sewed up. The seams are kind of messy because I'm not a professional sewer at all. I barely even know how to sew. But it's also supposed to be kind of messy looking, so that I wasn't too worried about how clean the seams looked. Once I have my head covering finished, I then just use fabric paint to make the cloth super dirty with a bunch of browns, blacks, and reds. Okay, so here is my cloth all painted. I probably overdid it a little bit, but it's fine. You want it nice and dirty and, well, however you want it. But yeah, just paint it before you add the bandages, because if you don't, I just find that it doesn't look as good because you have to like paint in between the bandages. It's just a little more difficult, so I figured do it before. Alright, so with that out of the way, we can now move on to the actual mask making process. So I'm gonna cover my foam head with more plastic wrap. That way none of the bandages stick to it and the whole mask will come off easy and in one piece and won't ruin my foam head. Alright, so I've got my foam head all covered in plastic wrap. I use a little X-Acto blade like this to cut a breathing hole in the mouth area and the nose area, so I'll do that now. You don't have to worry about it being messy because first of all it'll be covered with the bandages, but also I place masking tape over the insides temporarily before I put the bandages on. That way the bandages don't sink through, and then I take them back off. But yeah, they'll be covered up, so don't worry about them being messy. Okay, so I covered the mouth, the nose, and I'm also going to cover the eyes for the band-aid process. And also, this part is going to be optional, but I am going to make like a wormy look around this eye. So here I'm just going to show how I make the wormy eye details. So I use foam clay for this, and I just spread it all over the eye area where I want it. And then I use this ball tool thing, I don't really know what it's called, and I just make like this weird texture with it to kind of just make it look like gross, gory flesh. Next, I take some more foam clay and I just roll them up into little wormy pieces. And then I just stick them onto the fleshy part, however I think looks good. I just try to make it look super gross and pretty realistic. Next, I just use this little wiry brush thing and I stab a bunch of tiny little holes to make the worms look porous and just add a little more texture. I will say this doesn't do a whole lot, like the detail isn't super noticeable, so don't worry if you don't do it. So I've got my foam clay gory wormy eye done, so now I can put my mask on my foam head and then I'm going to cover the whole mask with this cloth. Before I pull the cover all the way down, I'm going to hot glue or use whatever glue you have, and I'm going to put it all around the outside of the mask to hold the cover in place. Once the fabric is all stuck, I'm just going to cut away all of the fabric from the face, but leaving all of this still intact. Alright, so now with that all in place, I'm going to start bandaging the back first. And for the back, I use these elastic bandage wraps because they're stronger and they're very stretchy. I'm just going to cut these into different size strips and then I'm just going to glue them onto the back of the mask. Alright, so I've got 4 different strips cut out. I have a longer piece that I'm going to be saving to make sure that I have enough. because I need a band to go around the neck once it's done. But I'm just gonna set that aside because I don't know how long I need it to be yet. So I'm just gonna work with these for now. When attaching them, I'm just gonna use hot glue, and I'm just gonna start on this side and try to glue them to where the mask still is, and then stretch them to this side. Alright, so here is the back, all covered in bandages. You can do more, you can do less, whatever you like. I'm just gonna go with this for now to make sure that I have enough of this bandage. Once you have all of this done, you can start doing the front with these bandage rolls. Now these are what you're gonna use with glue and water, kind of like paper mache. I've got my bandages all cut out into strips. I try to keep them relatively short because when you add the glue to them, they kind of stretch. I have a bowl of water right here, and then I just add some white Elmer's glue. Until I get a consistency kind of like this. I like it to be watery, but you still want it to be pretty sticky. With all of that done, I now add all of the bandages. I like to keep my bandages going in the same direction, so I usually go like this, like kind of diagonally, but literally do it however you want, however you like. This is just how I like to do it. I just dip the whole bandage in the glue and make sure it's all saturated for the most part, and then I just add it on. Bandages are all dry. It all hardens up pretty well. It's still a little soft, but it will harden up a lot more. But it's dry enough to where I can keep adding a few more worms to my eyes. Once again, this is optional. This is just the design that I'm going for, so you can just completely skip this step. So yeah. So same thing as before for this part, I'm using more of that foam clay, and I like to make the worms look like they tore a hole open in the bandages and are trying to crawl out. Just once again trying to make it look super gory and gross. Now with all of the clay dry and all the bandages, it's time for my favorite part, which is painting. So the first step that I do when I paint is I like to dry brush a yellowish white over all of the bandages on the back and the front, just to make them look super dingy and aged. Once again, just remember that if you paint anything on the back of the mask, including the bandages, to use fabric paint. This way the bandages can stay stretchy. Acrylic paint will make the fabric harden and will make it hard to stretch. Once I have the yellowish dry brushing done, I then outline all of my bandages with a light dry brush of black, and then either red or brown paint, depending on what color you want to do. Once I have all of the bandages outlined, I then like to blend all of the areas, like you can see here, together. I think it just makes everything come together more. And then I like to do another dry brush over all of the white parts with a black or a brown just to help dirty up a little more. I give all of the wormy bits a base coat of black. And then I continue dirtying up the rest of the bandages with blood splatter and dirt with various techniques. I paint the back the same way I paint the front, just by weathering the crap out of the bandages and outlining them in whatever color you want. And I've said it before, but I'll say it again, use fabric paint for the back. That way the bandages stay stretchy. I also found that adding a little bit of water to the fabric paint would help spread it a little easier, and I also really liked the result. Back to the wormy details, but once the black base coat was dry, I then go over with a few different kinds of red, just to give it some sort of variation. Here's the mask all painted. I love how the back looks. The dirty weathering is one of my favoriteest parts. It just looks so nice. So the next part is I'm going to make the hat. To make the hat, I just use scrap cardboard. You can also go on Amazon and find already made hats and add those, which is super easy and they look really cool. But I just like to use scrap materials and make my own that I can stick to the mask. To figure out the length of what I want the hat to be, I just fold the cardboard like this, and then I try to make sure that the hat sits like right here on the sides of the mask. I'm just gonna draw the hat and then I'll show you kind of like what I like to do. Okay, so here's an outline of how I want the hat, and I'm just gonna cut it out. I like to cut the hat in two separate pieces and then glue it together because it adds a little more dimension right here. I trace the hat onto scrap white fabric and make sure to leave seam allowance. Alright, so I cut two pieces out for both sides. This is the front piece, and then a smaller piece for the back. The back is supposed to fit almost perfectly, and then the front piece will go on and then will be attached around the back. I attach the back piece first, and I just use hot glue. Just be sure to not use too much or else it'll get kind of bumpy. And now I'll just add the front one. Here's what the hat looks like once all of the fabric is put on. The backside usually looks pretty ugly the way that I do it because I fold all of the fabric over. but you really don't see the back, and also I paint over it to make it blend in, so it's alright, as long as the front looks pretty good. When I paint the hat, I just use similar weathering and dry brushing techniques that I did the mask. Once I finish the hat, I just attach it to the mask with hot glue. Alright, so the last thing that I have to add is the Velcro neck strap that kind of just ties it all together and makes sure that you can tighten it to your liking and that everything fits comfortably. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue one side to this part under here, and then it'll just wrap around and Velcro somewhere over here. I have a long strip just to make sure that I have enough, but it's also stretchy, and then I'll just cut off the excess once I know how much I need. I painted the strap the same way I painted all of these bandages, and then I glued it on to this section underneath the bandages with hot glue. Now I have to just add some Velcro to the end part of this bandage and then somewhere right here where the two can connect. I cut 2 lengths of both the hooks and the loops, and then I'm just going to attach them with hot glue. And now finally, my last step is to just add some glossy Mod Podge to any bloody areas that I want to look more wet and gory. Once I take the mask off the form, I just go back in underneath and I take all of this tape out of the eye area. That way you're able to see out of it and also be able to breathe better.
The last step of making this mask is just to poke a couple more air holes in the nose and mouth area. The bandages that I use are pretty breathable on their own, but I like to just ensure that there's going to be enough airflow. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that this video clears up a lot of the questions I've been getting and also helps you make your own mask. I also want to say thank you so much for all of the attraction I've gotten on all of my nurse videos so far. It feels really good to help people make these things, and I'm super glad that people enjoy watching my stuff, so thank you so much.